Good morning, and welcome to today's webcast, Equity Process Assessment, Driving Operational Excellence. Before we begin, I'm going to play a brief housekeeping video.
Welcome, and thank you for viewing our webcast series. Before we begin, please keep the following in mind. You can customize how you view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top right of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons that relate to a different aspect of our session. You can download a PDF of today's slides from the Slide Deck and Handouts widget. You can ask questions by typing in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. This presentation is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
I'm pleased to introduce today's presenters for Moss Adams, Matt McKittrick, partner, and Tim Oakes, partner. With that, I'll turn it over to Matt to get the presentation started.
Thank you, Chad. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt McKittrick. I'm a partner here at Moss Adams. I've been with the firm about 7 years and just thought I'd introduce myself quickly in my background. I've been in consulting services since 1995, and I've really enjoyed focusing on business process improvement and operational excellence along the way. I spent quite a bit of time as an IT auditor, looking at business process controls and IT systems. And about in 2005, I ran into stock-based compensation, and that's kind of the focus area today. And it was quite an exciting time in those early years when stock that companies issued to employees to track their compensation had to be accounted for on the financial statements. And so suddenly stock was being expensed. There were deferred tax assets related to the stock that had to be recognized over time and held until the stock vested. And a litany of challenges arose out of that. And I spent about 10 to 15 years focused on that at PricewaterhouseCoopers and helped solve lots of problems with mergers and divestitures, and got quite close to all the equity vendor platforms that are out there, the broker systems like Charles Schwab's Equiview and E-Trade and Fidelity's platform, Certain, and many others. And so it's been quite an enjoyable ride. I absolutely love stock-based compensation because I see it as really one of the parts of the society that drives and motivates employees. And being able to account for that accurately is something that's pretty critical for companies. And we spend a lot of time focused on that here at Moss Adams. I'll turn over to Tim next to introduce himself.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, my name is Tim Oakes. I've been a partner here at Moss Adams, and I've been with this organization for over 20 years. And whereas Matt was mostly on the audit side, auditing the details and whatnot, I was more on implementation and working with the different systems and making interfaces. And it's always very interesting as I move from company to company. Each company has their own unique way of looking at things and own unique needs. And so it really is not a one size fits all. And so each company kind of has to decide what their priorities are and what they're trying to achieve and everything around their equity programs. And so it's quite exciting. It makes it fresh and new each day. And I really enjoy that. Back to you, Matt.
Great. Well, since you joined this webcast through our Moss Adams invite list, I expect you know pretty well about our firm. We're quite a long-running firm, been in business for 111 years and across most of the West and reaching farther east, and actually have access to over 120 countries through affiliate networks that we have. Almost 5,000 employees to date. Within our group at Moss Adams, we're part of the strategy, technology, and operations team. And on our smaller group, we focus on about 50 of us focus in on software solutions primarily. We also have a team of data scientists working on some of the more modern and emerging areas such as generative AI and machine learning techniques, and of course dashboarding and streamlining business reporting. as well in our group, we are very focused on being experts in the stock-based compensation world. We're quite proud of the fact that we've invested in training and I'm getting certified. About 18 of our employees have either the certified equity professional designation or the equity compensation analyst designation. So we're really committed to that because it brings us deep knowledge of the equity environments that we work in every day. I think we can go to the next slide, and we'll just go to our agenda here. Yeah, this is a fun topic for Tim and I, and I loved how he introduced me as the auditor and him as the operational specialist. I think that's kind of true, and certainly I like the dynamic perspectives that both him and I bring to the challenges that companies face. And in fact, a lot of the challenges are related to audit findings and the risks and challenges that can surface from that. So having that perspective is valuable. But a lot of what we're doing here and the goal today is to talk about how to become more operationally effective, because we all know that most equity shops and teams at companies don't have significant resources. They're being asked to do more with less and are constantly constrained by budgets, et cetera. So one of the key focus points today will be talking about the goal of what we're driving here and why to perform an equity process assessment. We'll go into deep examples of what an equity process assessment looks like. And probably many of you have seen some of these exhibits over your careers, but there is a good way to communicate why you're facing a challenge and what the solutions can be to that challenge. So some of this stuff will be quite valuable to you, we hope. And then finally, we'll close up with who should be performing the assessment, whether it's someone internally in your group or potentially a third party. So on to the goal here, and Tim will probably start piping in quickly, but what we see most of the time as an auditor, I see this is complete and accurate record keeping, right? And we want to make sure that when you issue stock to employees, it's tracked throughout its life cycle. Sometimes companies issue stock for 5 years in length. And so that has a long life in the systems that are tracking it and can be quite challenging over time. So to track it accurately over time. So there are a lot of platforms out there that do this work, the record keeping systems, but regardless, they still have to touch the HRIS systems that feed information to it. They have to pass settlement details when the equity is released to the employee onto the payroll platforms. There's taxes that need to be collected at that time. And so throughout that life cycle of stock issuance and grant processes all the way to the ultimate release, there are many, many chances for errors to happen, leading to delays and challenges for mainly the stock plan administrators and potentially issues with the participant themselves, where they either have erroneous payroll reporting, such as an incorrect W-2. We've seen in time errors that can actually lead to having to reissue the W-2 statements that go to employees for their annual income. So these can be quite consequential. Fines can happen on both the corporate side to submit the income taxes collected for the employees, as well as fines related to issuing an incorrect income statement for the employee, the W-2. So Tim, any thoughts on the other goals here?
The thing I like about this is, talking about accurate and complete. And this means that you're not just taking it from one perspective. You need to get all perspectives, all the stakeholders. And so we'll talk a little bit more in the coming slides about getting those other perspectives. And so, yeah, you and your team, if you're managing the equity process, you can sit down and you can build out something, but until you talk to payroll and accounting and technical accounting and HRIS, you might not have a complete, accurate understanding of what the whole process is.
Great. So I'll start off with this focal point too. We've highlighted some of these already, but it's a pretty simplistic list here of all the challenges that the stock administration teams at your companies face. Probably the number one is that, in fact, in the last year, and one of the reasons we actually put this slide deck together was that in the last year, the requirement by the SEC to release shares to employees is now T+1, which means that when the vest date happens, the shares are being released to the employee. They have to be sent to the employee's brokerage accounts in 1 day or less. And it used to be 2 days. And so suddenly, there's a significant decrease in the amount of time to do that. And while there aren't any specific fines yet related to releasing it late, it certainly would create a lot of questions and concerns. So most equity teams now are faced with having to really tighten their release cycles and make sure there aren't any errors and all the processes are streamlined. And that's really number one, driving this focus on equity process assessments. And while before the T+1 requirement, you may have had a pretty good process, gotten it done in roughly a day's time, sometimes 2 days. When you're forced to do it in 1 day, you can't have any slack in your business processes as part of the release. The second one is the IRS remittance. If you're paying over $100,000 in income or tax requirements that come from that income, if it's over $100,000, the IRS wants that in 24 hours as well. And we've seen many fines levied over time where IRS tax remittances were not submitted in 24 hours after the income occurred at that level. And that does have significant fines, sometimes in the millions of dollars. So both of those are critical here on the challenge front. We also have the resource constraints. Again, we talked about employees never having enough employees, always too much work. That's been a consistent problem always in these HR functions. Complexity continues to increase, both from the types of comp that are being issued today, as well as the stakeholders that are involved. Many systems touch this. Sometimes employees are going through mobility challenges. There may be other third parties beyond just your internal payroll and equity tracking systems that have to touch this data. So complexity never seems to get simpler over time. It always gets more complex. Tim, any other thoughts you want to highlight here?
No, I think that hopefully everyone on this call already has a good understanding about what are all those things that are keeping you awake and wanting to go, make sure that you have everything covered. Thanks, Matt.
Sure. So just another way to review those challenges with kind of a stakeholder pressure point visual here. These are the multiple parties that often push on the stock administration teams. I think it's pretty intuitive here as you look at it, but these are at least 6 different points that hit the stock administration team almost daily. Perhaps the international may not happen as much, but when if you look at a day in the life of a stock administration professional, you can expect that they're probably engaging with several of these parties every day. And it just adds to the limited time to process things efficiently and make sure it's complete and accurate. So thoughts on this, Tim?
No, I think this is, just showing all the pressures and yep.
Yeah,
we can go
great.
on.
Well, Tim, I think this is a good slide to transition to you a little bit to lead and maybe talk about what we're talking about here with the equity process assessment.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. Yeah. So now what, and like I said before, each company is a little different. Some of these you might not have, but there's complex connections throughout your company, and you have a bunch of processes that all have to hit, and they all add to your overall, equity processing environment, and can cause problems for you if you're trying to get some stuff done. So it's really important to be able to drill in, figure out where you stand on each of these items. And as we go in and we talk a little bit more about the process of doing the process assessment, one thing is you look at a list like this and kind of define the scope of what you're going to be looking at. And this is a great list to start with. And so you can sit there and say, well, where is Treasury involved? Where is the comp committee involved? And what kind of inputs do we get from them? And then anything you wanted to add to that one, Matt?
No, I like how it's organized, where you have these 3 buckets focused on internal processes, the transactional and external processes. And oftentimes there's a specific pain point in one of the internal processes, for example. And, for instance, that 390, 3921, 3922 statements, which deal with qualified awards and how to process that. So, you can very easily focus your equity process assessment on a specific line item, and you just go through the process to understand where the pain points are in it and document them and bring them up to management. But these are the types of areas that we often see surface when we're talking about reviewing an equity process for a company. Another good reason to bring these up is when there's a divestiture or a merger and acquisition that occurs. Often there's a new set of equity that gets folded into the company through the acquisition. Certainly there's new HR feeds and other connected processes that often have to be updated through that integration. And that's just another why you might need to do this. And another good example is the T+1 change. That's just a push from a regulatory side to tighten processes and drive that change. So good. We'll move to the next slide. And I think I'll take this one here just to talk about, we laughed a little bit about this because it's like pretty straightforward, right? When you do an assessment, and many of you I'm sure have been through assessments in your careers over the life cycle, really we break it down to 4 major phases: from understanding what the process is, we call it discovery, documenting the process, and that's really taking the things that you collected during interviews and putting it into a document. Review may be a little new. We insist on doing review in our process, where we take what we've collected and our understanding of the information, and particularly the pain points and potentially the recommendations that we have, and reviewing it with the key stakeholders to make sure that they understand clearly what we're putting forward and agree with it. And then finally, the presentation phase, where you're taking this to senior stakeholders, potentially executives that would ultimately make a decision on whether to go forward with recommendations, et cetera. So Tim, I can turn to you. Any feedback on this slide before we go forward?
No, let's just dive right in. And by the way, I do see that there's some questions coming in, and we will get to them. And so go ahead and throw any other ones on there as you wish. And we will find time to make sure that we get them all answered, or try to. So phase 1, discovery. And so like I said before, you need to figure out what is the appropriate scope of the assessment. Sometimes when you're doing an assessment, it's because, you got a new payroll system, or you got, a change in your HR system, or you got a new equity award program that you're rolling out. So you might be able to scope down your assessment where you're not trying to look at the whole thing, and you're just zeroing in on some specific pieces. So that's the first part. Figure out what your scope is that you want. You end up going through and interviewing all the key stakeholders. And talking to them about what works for them, what doesn't work. I love this portion of it because you sometimes get some aha moments in here where you start talking to payroll, and payroll is saying, oh well, we have to do this to do that, and it's like, oh, why are you doing that extra step? We could do that over here. And so this is a fun piece. But, you are going to go through and confirm all the processes, whether it's daily, monthly, sometimes annually, some annual processes, to make sure that your equity plan is going well. And so you dig into and document the discovery of all your pieces, and make sure that all your stakeholders have a say in this. And that's very important. Matt, anything to add to this one?
I'm just thinking about some of my experiences with companies that are high-functioning companies. These connection points between the various business units are streamlined, and they work well because they have open channel. A lot of issues often surface, though, when they're siloed organizations, especially if there are 2 different senior executives calling the shots for these orgs. The stock compensation teams are often organized within HR, but sometimes they're organized within legal, sometimes organized under finance. And so each of those corporate leaders can have different strategies and priorities, and often can segregate that team, the equity team, from the rest of the org, just because there's different leaders running the groups. And so this discovery process, as Tim pointed out, is quite entertaining sometimes, because you can just see the pretty straightforward problems, but because of the separation of the business units, they often just kind of fester and become real pain points. And so this discovery phase often just exposes a lot of things that are kind of fairly obvious, but because the communication channels were not very clearly established, that's where the breakdowns are happening. So a lot of the problems that surface may actually just be simple improvement in communication versus systematic processes. And that's what the discovery process is all about, is really trying to lay out, okay, we hear a lot of pain coming from this group. Let's hone in on what specifically it is and get the various stakeholders involved. And oftentimes they're pretty simple problems to solve. Some are obviously more complex and lead to systematic type improvements, but it's a good process, because what I've seen over and over again is entities saying, groups saying, especially stock plan administrator groups saying, thank goodness we did this equity process assessment, because it's just constant pain. Every vest cycle this would come up and we'd struggle with it. Now we have it written and documented, and we can work through it, and it's no longer just in our head or a constant pain point. It's something that we've all agreed is a problem, and we're going to move through it. So it is a great phase in the process. I'll push it on to the next one. Tim, you want to take this one?
Thanks. Yeah, so as you've gone through that discovery, of course, you're documenting, and you zero in and you listen very carefully and make sure that everyone has a say, and bring those forward, especially the targeted stuff about what you're trying to, zero in on if you're rolling out a new program or rolling out a new payroll system. But also just general stuff. And like Matt was saying, I think the best organizations, the different departments act as partners. And that's, those are the ones where they both are trying to help each other succeed. And the organizations where this really gets challenging is where each one of them acts as their own country. And, it's kind of like, well, that's not my problem, that's your problem. And so, but this gives an opportunity while you're documenting, you are documenting everyone's perspective, and you're making sure you get both the good points and the bad points. And you can zero in on that. And we like creating a high-level diagram, and we try to create that right up front, so it shows all the various, processes and how they interact. And that's really useful as you're going through the discovery process, to start off with a diagram that you can go and show people it, and it's a straw man that people can go, no, that doesn't happen there, it happens somewhere else, and it's something concrete that people can zero in on. Now, you keep the diagrams very meaningful. Sometimes we like to call out the manual versus automatic. Sometimes we highlight pain points in a particular way. Other ones, we do try to keep a list of detailed descriptions throughout. Matt, anything you wanted to throw on this document?
Yeah, this one, this is really critical, because I think a lot of most people can get through discovery pretty easily without supporting documentation. You could talk about problems and discuss potential solutions, but to document those problems in a way that can be communicated, and especially if you think about like an executive reviewing a proposal to, say, improve a process or to get a new piece of software to address the challenge in that process, they're going to need details, and especially what are we trying to solve? What's the ROI on the investment to solve it? And nothing works better, in my experience, communicating upward to an executive who's got lots of things to consider and manage every day. Nothing works better than a picture visually describing the kinds of challenges. So I'm kind of excited. Later on in this presentation, you'll see some examples of how we have taken 80 different pain points, for instance, and consolidated them into one slide that then highlights and categorizes where those pain points are occurring, what's manual versus automatic. And so this is really some of the special sauce that warrants maybe bringing in a third party, because how you document these problems and can convey the message upward to tell, like a picture being worth 1,000 words is pretty meaningful in terms of getting through that and getting, say, executive approval to get your investments set aside. All right, Tim, we'll go to the next one.
So, of course, and Matt, I really liked what you said about, a third party, and we were going to kind of peek a little bit ahead in the presentation. definitely having a third party doing the discovery and doing the documentation can help calm some waters. There could be some emotion, there could be some, some opinions. And so having an outside third party come in and give another perspective can sometimes calm down those emotions between departments. So after you've done the discovery and you've documented it, and you usually then have the final documentation, you go back to the stakeholders and you start off with the equity team and you dig in and show what the final looks like. And then you go to the stakeholders, make sure they understand and they agree with what you have. And that gives you an opportunity to incorporate any missing pieces. Maybe you heard something not quite right or put something in the wrong place. You can also confirm some pain points, as well as trying to quantify risks. Some of the time through the documentation, you might have some solutions where people talk about things, and so you can gather those at that point, and then you can show them up here and during the review as well. And so that's the review. It's really going back to everyone, making sure that the stories are good, and then working on actually figuring out what the solution is. And you work with the team and you start talking about possible solutions, and there's usually not just one solution. You can have a variety of solutions, and maybe there's different choices. You might automate some stuff, you might consolidate some stuff. And so, and with the team, you might come through and say, let's prioritize and figure out exactly what we're doing here. Matt, anything else on the review portion?
Yeah, you'll be showing later some exhibits of documents and that come out of it. But one that I've often seen get clarified in the review process is the swim lane diagram, where, in narrative and understanding the process, when we've been documenting on our jobs, we often hear that one team is doing X with a process, and it turns out that some entirely different team is doing it. And so the boxes, the decision, the document flow, it goes to a swim lane process, and we'll showcase some of that here. But I think that's the one that gets a lot of scrutiny if you're doing a good job on it, to just sort of show, yeah, I agree that this particular team has this file and they do this to it, and it moves through the process to the next team. Getting that ironed out clearly in the review process is one of the things that makes the review so important, because you don't want to show up to an executive meeting with some broken swim lane document, right? It needs to be confirmed and quantified, and often it's the first time a team has ever seen their processes laid out in a way like swim lane diagram with pain points and issues straight in front of them. So it is quite revealing especially to show the complexity of what they're doing. A lot of it's not necessarily a black box, but a lot of people view the equity processes, they don't understand them because they're just being done within the equity team. When you lay out the number of touch points as it's going through its life cycle, say an equity release cycle where millions of dollars of stock are being released to an employee and taxes are collected, the complexity of that process is significant when you document it and put in swim lanes, you can really see how many steps are involved, and you can lay out the pain points on the review, and it really does bring great clarity to it, and that educates the senior leadership to the value the teams are adding and how many challenges they're facing, and it really does make them feel sympathy for problems that are occurring. So this is a great step, and we'll show you some of this in a minute here. So now we get to present and recommend. I want you to take this.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, and to your point, that documentation, actually, I've worked with organizations where they hold on to that and they use that as an onboarding tool when they bring new team members on. And so, yeah, it can live on to beyond just a project. So the last phase is where you actually present and recommend. And so, and it's important to get all the stakeholders on board with this. You're going to go to the executives, you're going to talk about what needs to happen, what are the solutions, is there an ROI, a return on investment, how much time is it going to take? And then, really dig into some of the recommendations about what and why. This is the part, it really helps to emphasize cost. It really helps to emphasize risk. We have heard more than a few times that the executives aren't very interested in saving stock admin teams time. So sitting there going, well, this is going to carve off 2 hours of my staff's time a week. It's like, well, what else are they going to do if they're not doing this process? But so you really try to zero in on, well, there could be risk here. There could be, some cost associated with it, and gives you an opportunity to really drive home some of those real reasons to do this. Matt, anything on here you want to add?
Yeah, I liked your point on focusing on risk versus just time savings. And as an auditor, you're often thinking of what can happen in this process, where can the controls break down, and what would be the consequence of that breakdown. And so focusing in on the fact that maybe, yes, the stock administration team has been able to handle this throughput at the current rate, but if there's an acquisition coming, or as the growth plans, the strategy of the company is to grow rapidly, quickly, things will start to break down, bursting at the seams, unless they hire more people or build more robust processes. So often bringing up, aligning with the vision statement of the executives and the corporate strategy to make sure that you're thinking ahead of what's potentially coming down the line. A lot of the leading companies we work with are often trying to scale rapidly. And so they're thinking, well, yes, we can handle it today with the team we have, but in a year from now, we're going to have a big acquisition or something major is coming through. We need to be getting this straight now so we can handle that without having to double the team size, which would lead to risk and potentially fines if there are errors that don't get detected. I had one other point there, but I'm forgetting it now, so we'll move on. It'll probably come back here, Tim. So now we're going to go to the types of deliverables, right?
Yeah. So what we, the kind of deliverables we usually do, some kind of executive summary. So something that they can read and it just boils it down for them. We always give some kind of high level flow chart talking about the current state and sometimes illustrating what the to be state would look like. We really try to emphasize pain points and talking about gaps and how to move things forward. A lot of times a matrix, talking about the particular issues and what is the impact, what's the risk of that, and what is the cost of fixing it. And then usually a list of potential solutions. And so, yeah, when you're going in front of the executive, it's like, great, you highlighted this problem. Now, what are you going to do about it? And so you need to come with, here's what we're thinking about doing to solve, and how much would it cost and how long would it take? Anything you want to add, Matt?
Yeah, and I remember this kind of brought up the point that I was trying to think of earlier, which is that presenting a list of options is often a good idea because it'll show that you've been thoughtful in terms of perhaps expense, time, level of commitment of your IT resources. I mean, there's many things that can drive different solutions, and being thoughtful about how those solutions could come together is really important to show that you've looked under every stone for consideration before you go ask for some money or investment or something like that. And so it's important to show the solutions, but at the same time, I think it's critically important to pick one that you recommend and why. And so that being able to say this is the best solution because we intend to grow by double the size. So rather than doing a simple approach with some basic tools today, we'd rather just build the right tool for the right solutions because we're going to go there in the next 2 years, and why have to do rework a year from now? And so being thoughtful in how you present your analysis of the options and the recommended solution is a key deliverable there for the executives. All right, so Tim, we could talk about pain point deliverables and what they look like, right? So this would be great.
Yeah, we're just going to give you some example deliverables. We don't really think this is prescriptive. It really is about what are your goals in your presentation and your process. This is an example of a summary. We tried to get a bunch of stuff onto one page for the executives, and there were details behind this. And so what you can see is that there is 6 boxes of this, of this process. Is a deferred comp process is what this is. And then we're highlighting, that each one of these has a SOX control and how many steps are in it. And then those orange and red circles are talking about the pain points. And so the first one has 6 medium pain points and 7 critical pain points. And so quickly you can look at this and get a kind of an overall picture of what the process is. But at the same time, so we wanted this as a summary, and if the executives only saw this, then great, we got our story across, and we had some specific stories we were trying to get across. But if you needed to, you could pull up the detail. And so I'll actually move on to this is some of the detail that was behind that. And so what we have is in the bottom left-hand corner, there's just an example swim lane flowchart, and we'll get to a real example, a full-size one. But what we're illustrating here is in this swim lane flowchart, we have little badges talking about the kind of pain points each one of these boxes has. And then we have an Excel spreadsheet that we link to this swim lane flowchart that actually has full descriptions of each of these boxes. And so it's talking about where is it, and what does it do, and what are the pain points with it. And we had little codes, that there's pain about processing, pain about, manual efforts, and pain, about completeness. So I'm going to move on to, this is actually a picture, and you can't see it very well, but this is a picture. Hopefully you've seen a swim lane flow chart before. We try to keep it very simple, so there's no diamonds on here. We don't want to lose people off in decision loops and things like that. We just try to put it very straightforward, but you can see we have some badges on there, so it links to the Excel spreadsheet. We highlight the pain points and see a bunch of red on here. You see some orange on here. And this is all about this is a deferred comp program that we were working with. Matt, anything you wanted to talk about? I know I jumped through those 3 diagrams very quickly.
No, I think this, I was highlighting some of these earlier, and so now you get to see what they look like. And yeah, this is the stuff that's kind of special sauce of getting a company to help you with this process, because building a Visio document that contains these swim lanes can take hours in and of itself. So having templates and things you can leverage is useful. But I agreed with Tim that one of the best parts of these assessment processes is that it gives you visibility to what you're doing today. And while that may be changing over time, now you've got a great document that you can leverage for training and onboarding. And it usually, he's right, these usually become living, breathing exhibits within the education and training processes at companies. Potentially also, you were highlighting the SOX side of it for companies that are subject to SOX requirements. It's quite nice to have these very vivid and clear documents that highlight the controls throughout the process, so that you can have reliance on some of those controls for your SOX processes. Great. So we'll go to the next slide, I guess, Tim.
Yeah.
So this is another visual. We kind of call this a system context diagram. As you could gather, this one is probably designed to be quite horrific in terms of conveying the level of problem that this particular example is showcasing. So this is a current state document, and it highlights the numerous entities in the green boxes. These are the stakeholders that are touching the equity processes over the course of the life cycle, sometimes daily, sometimes quarterly or so, with vesting processes that happen. But one of the best visuals about this, again, a picture's worth 1,000 words, is an executive can suddenly see that, boy, this process, while to me it just happens, and it's often the back of our HR functions. The reality is there are 15 different groups that are touching this, and there are 82, in this specific example, 82 pain points where there's either a manual process or some limited functionality that creates extra work for the employees that are for the stock plan administrator to handle the issues that are coming through. And so it really does quickly visualize for executive consumption the thoroughness of the analysis that was just done and the challenges facing the equity team. And I like how the use of red arrows shows manual processes. The black lines and arrows are more of the automated processes. In this case, you can see that most of what's happening today in this exhibit is manual, which is kind of shocking when you think about it. I liked how it's grouping by pain point area. So on the left side, we've got a focal on employee experience. A lot of these companies, especially the executives, if the equity settlement process has got challenges with it, the employees are going to complain upward to the executives. And so they like to know how many of these pain points are going to improve the employee experience. And so we call those out separately. Operational effectiveness, that's what we've really been focused on mostly, is just trying to make sure that the stock plan teams can do the most with the employee headcount that they have, and try and streamline that. So there are 44 areas to improve operational effectiveness in this example. There are also pain points around financial and regulatory issues and data integrity issues. So that sort of shows a comprehensive way of reflecting the different pain points that occur and grouping them. And that way, what's good about this is now an executive can see it, and they might ask, well, where's the biggest pain point? How are you going to fix this? It kind of stems the next sets of questions. And so we can go to the next slide, which I will do here. Good. And showcase a potential future and exhibit. So this is, again, where you review things internally to make sure that the stock plan administration teams are on board with the proposals that you're coming up with. But in this case, the proposal was to create a comprehensive equity tool in the middle that consolidated and tracked a number of them and automated a number of the data feeds and made sure they were complete and accurate before going to the broker platform. And so they were collecting data from the payroll systems, from the HRIS systems, even from local payroll systems, and consolidating that, making sure it's complete and accurate, and managing it back and forth with the broker. And so you can just see how much cleaner this looks. There's a few red lines, manual lines that are occasionally needed, but for the most part, the future state showcases that most of the lines are either automated or vastly improved. And the pain points may still exist slightly, but have gone down from 82, I think, on the prior slide, down to 14 in the future state, which is manual, or is manageable. Most companies have manual processes, and they just want to make sure they're automating the things that create the most work on a regular basis. Any other thoughts on these two slides, Tim?
No, you did a good job. Thanks, Matt.
All right. Yeah, we got just a couple minutes left, don't we? So you should maybe talk about pros and cons of going to a third party or doing it yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So who should perform the assessment? So you can actually hire someone like us, or you can, or you might have a group inside your company that does it, or you can do it yourself. And so we just laid out some pros and cons about that. If you're doing it yourself, you have an intimate knowledge of the process already, so it gives you a head start. You build and own the process right from the beginning, and you already know all the documentation standards and communication styles, and you know who likes what. The cons are you might not have as many as much exposure to different ideas and approaches, and an outside advisor might be able to bring that in. What I talked about before, there can be potential bias and conflict between the stakeholders, and so having a third party can smooth that over. And then, of course, there's the time constraints. You're doing your daily tasks, and then you have to add this on top of it. Over on the advisor, they bring a lot of experience. They have committed resources, and they're a neutral third party. But of course, you have to onboard them. You have to, there's a little bit of getting them up to speed on your environment and your people. And then there's some knowledge transfer handoff required before and after. And they have to understand the new team dynamic and unfamiliar with what that is. But some ideas, definitely for small ones, consider doing it yourself. For larger ones, think about using a partner, but here's some things you can use to figure that out. And I know we're at time. I know we have like 3 questions in the question. We will get to those in email and get you an answer. Just don't want to take the time right now, but we will respond to you in email.
Yeah,
So
I think Tim, just the point about who should do it, I think it doesn't matter, right? I think what I've seen more often than not is that doing it is the important thing. I can't tell you how many times I hear about pain happening in HR functions, and then the next question I ask is, well, have you submitted summary of the pain upward to your leadership so they are aware of it? It's like, well, I tell them about it, over my one-on-ones and that sort of thing, but that's not really going to move the needle. So I hope in this presentation you've gotten an idea of how we showed you some really thorough examples, but Tim's right. Even with simple problems, committing to doing an assessment of the problem, documenting it, reviewing it, and then presenting it, just having that rigor will ease a lot of pain and get you in the habit of just pushing through the problems rather than continuing to live in them, right? And so hopefully that this was helpful for everyone, and we will circle back to you soon. Thanks again for your time. Any other closing comments, Tim?
No, but I think we can hand it off to Chad to wrap us up.
All right. Thank you, Matt and Tim, for a great presentation today. And if we didn't have time to answer your questions, we will do our best to follow up with you after the webcast. Here's a link to an online survey where you can provide feedback for today's presentation. Please take a moment to complete this, as your feedback is very important to us. Thank you for joining us again today, and hopefully you'll join us again next time.